When a student dreams of being a powerful assassin who fights among the shadows, but he has already reached the limit of human power, a car accident gives him the chance to reincarnate in another life full of magic in which he will try to destroy an evil cult that tries to take over the world. Will he be able to do it? Let's find out. Anime starts with a high school student, Akane Nishino, who begins her routine day. Her driver takes her to school where she is greeted by all the simps. But when she gets to her locker, she meets a person she hates, Minoru Kajino. They have been classmates for 3 months and he still can't remember her name. Already in class, Nishino is the center of attention of the class because he will star in a new TV drama, but he finds his classmates' indifference irritating and enigmatic. Akane decides to step aside for a moment to be alone and locks herself in the bathroom. She confesses to herself that her life is a sham and that she pretends to be fine to please everyone. As night falls, she calls her private driver to take her back home, but he is intercepted by a group of gang members. Kagane doesn't know this, so she decides to walk home. While doing so, the same gang members intercept and kidnap her. She wakes up in an unknown place and is surrounded by criminals, who tell her that her parents will pay them a fortune for her ransom. Meanwhile, Kajino watches all this from the roof without anyone knowing. One of the criminals tries to abuse Akane, but at that very moment, a mysterious man disguised in a ski mask bursts onto the scene and easily defeats the first man. He then begins to fight the other criminal and the fight gets a little more difficult, but the hero defeats him easily anyway. He releases Akane and leaves the scene. The next day everything goes back to normal in Akane's life, who pretends that nothing happened, as her father forbade the press to talk about the kidnapping. Later, a news broadcast reveals that Kajino died in a car accident. Kajino appears in a new world where his power has no limits and he can become as strong as he wishes. He forms a new team of waifus and aims only to become the Shadow Eminence. Kajino has a flashback about the day of his birth in his new life. He is now part of a family that for generations has forged powerful knights, but all expectations are placed on his sister, the firstborn and heir to the family. Back in the present, Kajino tests his powers on a group of bandits whom he easily defeats. While taking his treasures, he encounters a strange monster in a cage. The protagonist takes the monster and experiments with it for months, managing to stabilize his incredible amount of magic. But in doing so, the beast turned into the beautiful waifu from the beginning. Kajino explains to her that she was under a curse performed by a strange organization, but only invents it so that she will join him. He names his new partner Alpha and christens his new team Shadow Garden. 3 years later, he trains with his sister and allows himself to be beaten to keep a low profile. The next morning, his family is thrown into turmoil when they discover that Claire, Kajino's sister, has disappeared from their home on the very day she was supposed to leave for the special Dark Knight training. Kajino leaves the place and asks Delta, one of Shadow Garden's waifus who is able to transform into other people, for a report of what happened. She replies that the people behind the kidnapping are the members of the devil cult, so the whole group goes to the place. Claire is tortured by a high-ranking officer who compliments her combat powers, but she gets angry when he mentions that he also wants to see what her little brother Sid is capable of, so she is violently beaten by the man. At that moment he hears that his officers are under attack, and as he leaves the dungeon he encounters the group of waifus who have already killed almost every man in the place. He consumes a pill that releases his power to fight with the members of the Shadow Order but decides to escape when he realizes that he will not be able to confront them. While trying to flee through a subway tunnel, he sees Kajino walking alone in the place and thinks he is easy prey. He immediately starts attacking him, but Sid manages to repel the officer's attacks with ease. The combat seems to be very unfavorable for the officer, so he decides to take a pill capable of greatly increasing his power. With his new transformation, the man tries to defeat the protagonist, but the latter defeats him again and ends his life. Before leaving, Kajino sees that the officer left a gold pendant with a picture of his daughter. The group rescues Claire and everything returns to normal for the protagonist. Only that, at the end of the episode, the waifus say goodbye to Kajino without giving him an explanation. When he turns 15, the protagonist enrolls in the Dark Knight school to which Claire was sent. To go unnoticed here too, he hangs out with the most mediocre students and acts like just another loser. One day while walking to class, the group comes across a billionaire student confessing to Alexia, one of the most popular and talented girls in the school. She rejects him and Kajino's friends dare him to ask her out. The protagonist seizes the excellent opportunity to look like a loser, but is surprised to see that Alexia agrees to go out with him. The next day, while Kajino is having lunch with his friends, he is surprised by Alexia, who sits down to eat with them. Kajino tries his best to look bad to her, but his plan backfires and she invites him to join the advanced fencing classes. At the academy, the two train together and he sees the delicate technique that his young sugar mommy has with the sword. At the end of the training, Kajino realizes that Alexia agreed to go out with him so she wouldn't have to commit to Zenon. The next day, while traveling by train, Alexia tells the protagonist that she hates that her sister is so much better than her. She also tells him that her sister makes fun of his fighting style by telling him that it is very good. But Kajino tells her that his style really is good and that he hates that she doesn't appreciate it. This upsets Alexia, who threatens Kagyun and leaves the place indifferently. Kajino goes to school normally, believing that his relationship with Alexia is over, but runs into Zenon and his knights. He interrogates the protagonist and tells him that Alexia is missing and that the last one to see her was him. Alexia wakes up in a dungeon and sees a shy mutant woman in front of her. A maniacal scientist appears on the scene and extracts a blood sample from Alexia's arm to do his experiments. At the same time, the Knights of the Order take Kajino prisoner and interrogate him by torture. On the other side of the room, Zenon and Iris talk about Alexia's disappearance. Iris confesses that she doesn't think Kajino is suspicious because he is not strong enough to break someone with Alexia's strength. But Zenon tells her that Kajino is not trustworthy. As they talk, Iris observes that Claire tries to disobey the orders in order to help her brother. This causes her to order the protagonist's freedom, but she sends spies to keep an eye on him. Kajino is released by the guards and he decides to return home. On his way back, he notices that he is being watched, and as he gets off the train, he meets Alpha, who gives him some directions. They meet again at Kajino's house and she tells him that everything is going according to his plan. Then he meets Beta, to whom he explains in detail what is about to happen. He leaves his house dressed as a civilian and is intercepted by the corrupt guards who accuse him of kidnapping Alexia. But this time Kajino shows his true identity and fulminates them immediately. Back in the dungeon, the mad scientist manages to experiment with Alexia's real blood by injecting it into the creature. His plan works halfway, as the mutant gains great power, but he kills the scientist because of his mistreatment and then frees Alexia. Upon leaving the lab, he meets Zenon, who reveals that he was the one who came up with the whole thing. She decides to confront him, but he manages to defeat her easily. At that precise moment, the protagonist appears and introduces himself as Shadow. The beast devastates everything in its path and easily defeats the armed soldiers. The Knights of the Order try to cut off its arms, but the monster regenerates almost instantly. At that moment, Princess Iris appears on the scene and begins to fight. Her strong attacks are enough to stop him, but she does not manage to end his life. Alpha appears and ends the fight with only one combat, revealing that the beast was the daughter of the officer who had kidnapped Claire. Alpha tells Iris to enjoy the show Shadow Garden will put on and says goodbye. Zenon fights with all his might to defeat Sid, but he's just playing around. The knight gets tired of being underestimated by the young man and takes a pill to increase his powers. This is also not enough to match the young man of the shadows, and he performs an impressive power that is capable of destroying almost the entire city. The explosion leaves everyone open-mouthed and Kajino leaves the scene. The next day, the protagonist leaves Alexia in the friend zone and she takes revenge on him in the most innocent way, attacking him with her sword. While walking home wounded, Kajino stumbles upon a distracted girl who falls in love with him. A man murders another man in an alley. As he leaves a note blaming Shadow Garden for the crime. Iris and Alexia meet Sherry Barnett, the young woman who met Kajino the day before. The princess asks her to analyze the strange artifact the soldiers found in a devil cult hideout. Although she is initially hesitant to take on such a huge responsibility, her father convinces her. While Sherry talks to her father, Alexia asks Iris to let her participate in the investigation and the princess agrees. The group of friends goes to a mall to spend the afternoon, but a strange girl invites them to take a survey. She takes him to the top of the enclosure and he is surprised by Gamma, who is in charge of investing Shadow Garden's money. The waifu explains to Kajino that the mall belongs to the organization and he takes some coins before leaving. Back home with his friends, he makes an excuse to stay on the streets and get information about the imposter who is tarnishing Shadow Garden's name. He watches from the roof as Alexia fights one of these imposters and runs to help her when the imposter receives reinforcements. He chases them down and kills one of them, leaving one of his waifus to take care of the other. Alexia meets with Iris to tell her about this, so Iris deduces that someone is trying to destroy Shadow Garden. The next day at school, Kajino gives Sherry chocolates as soon as he sees that she is investigating the strange devil cult artifact. Later she meets with her father, who explains that the boy must be interested in her, so Sherry remembers the day she met Kagyun. Kagyun meets Nu, the new Shadow Garden recruit. She explains to him that the devil cult is experimenting on young people all over the city to brainwash them. They use these people to murder people all over the city and frame Shadow Garden. He tells her that he has a plan, but that he will have to think for a few days to carry it out. Later, Sid faces Rose Oriana in a preliminary swords tournament. She is one of the most virtuous students in the academy, besides being the president of the student council. Again, Sid lets himself be defeated more than once so as not to raise suspicions of his true power. She even makes a fool of herself by getting up again and again from the ground until finally, the referee stops the battle. As he leaves the stadium, he meets Sherry, who invites him to lunch. She gives him a gift and asks him to be friends. Kajino realizes almost immediately that Sherry's father is there. He also recognizes the man as one of the most powerful and well-known people in town, so he doesn't want to engage in much of a relationship with them. Sherry remembers seeing her beloved spending a lot of time with Alexia, so she decides to visit her at her home. Upon arriving, Sherry begins to ask her if they are no longer a couple. Alexia replies that they are not, as she did not know Sherry's innocent intentions. The young scientist tells her that she is in love with Kajino, which makes Alexia very jealous, but she doesn't tell Sherry about it. Sherry is very happy to learn that Alexia and Sid are no longer a couple, so she bids Alexia a kind farewell. The next day at school, Rose enters along with another student council member to explain to the students about the new rule changes. At the same time, members of the devil cult were initiating an anti-magic spell to attack the academy. Rose tries to confront one of them, but a spell affected all the magic in the place and Kajino must run to save her. The blow hits the protagonist's chest and wounds him fatally. The end. Thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, and click the bell icon to get new anime recaps.